Hello and welcome to another episode of The Debrief, the podcast that takes you deep into the heart of the paragliding world. I'm your host, Lee Trihorn from the Free Flight Academy, and as always we'll be joined by the UK's #1 acro pilot and our resident voice of reason, Jack Pimblett. During this series of podcasts we'll be taking an in-depth look into the world of paragliding and bringing you some educational hints, tips and bits to take your paragliding to the next level. We'll also be getting the thoughts and opinions of many of the top pilots from across the paragliding community, and we'll be taking a look at the more entertaining, the lighter-hearted side of paragliding, and some of the downright craziness and silliness that is our world of free flight. So sit back, relax, and join us for another episode of The Debrief. Okay, let's get cracking. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about a subject that's a little bit more serious. We're going to talk about the F word, which stands for fear. Thank you very much. Let's keep it clean, please. And we're going to talk about the fear that we experience in paragliding. Do we all experience fear? Am I the only one who goes up to launch feeling that little bit of fear, that trepidation, that nervousness, whatever you want to call it? Or is every single pilot out there absolutely terrified or engulfed with fear every time they go flying? Get our resident voice, Jack Pimblett, involved to see his opinion on fear, how he handles fear. First thing I can tell you is fear is absolutely normal. Don't you worry, as we'll find out as we delve into this subject. It's actually a very, very good thing. I've been flying for 13, 14 years. And so I've had plenty of opportunity during my flying to experience lots of different situations, varieties of flying and circumstances. So I'll talk a little bit about my own personal experience. And I've also been teaching paragliding for the last 11 or 12 years. So I've had ample opportunity to look deep into the eyes of many different students at many different levels, whether they're doing their day one, learning to soar for the first time, learning to thermal, doing their first SIV course, whatever it might be. I've had a lot of opportunity to see how fear manifests itself. So let's have a look at the subject of fear. Now then, first thing we should understand about fear is it's perfectly normal and it's absolutely okay to talk about. Everybody, you can't see me now, but my hand is well up into the air. Everybody has experienced, or definitely will experience some degree, some form of fear during their paragliding career. But fear is quite a general term. It's kind of like the mother word, a big umbrella where underneath it, for me, there's lots of different sort of versions, different types of fear. Some of it is quite enjoyable. There's enjoyable fear, would you believe? That kind of nervousness, think back to when you were that early pilot, that EP pilot, or in the UK system we call it the EP, that day one, coming to do your first ever paragliding flights. You have that trepidation. You're not sure what to expect. You have the butterflies in the tummy. You have the nervousness. I guess you could call it fear as well, but fear for me sounds like quite a sinister a word. I prefer to think of nervousness. There's butterflies in your tummy. Generally, kind of fear, nervousness is of the unknown. If you're not sure about something or you don't really understand something, then you tend to be a bit nervous or fearful of it. And it's quite an enjoyable feeling. You're nervous before you take off, and it's a good thing to be. It's okay to feel that. Why is it so okay to feel fear? Because it keeps you safe. It means that you're taking it seriously, that you're actually conscious of what you're doing. Paragliding, whether we like it or not, there's no point beating around the bush. Paragliding can be a dangerous sport. We can minimize the risks as much as we can, but we can never take all the risks away. There is always an element of danger in paragliding. So having a healthy respect for that and understanding of that is a really good thing. And that fear, that's your kind of your subconscious, just making sure that you're aware of your position. When we leave the ground, we're not really supposed to be there. So you can't blame your body for giving you that little bit of nervousness in your tummy. However, it can be a fun thing. I see lots of pilots that come onto the hill, they're a little bit nervous. And a lot of the response, the way we deal with that is there's a lot of giggling. A lot of nervous pilots in the group can be quite entertaining because they're all generally giggling like they're on laughing gas. Because we know that we can deal with, we're kind of almost subconsciously enjoying that fear element of it. We're actually experiencing an emotion, we're actually feeling like we're alive. Although fear might be warning you of impending doom or making us realise our mortality, actually at the same time, we've never felt so alive. It's a great emotion to have. I like it. It's one thing I love about paragliding, is it actually gives you some emotion. It makes you feel like like you're actually alive. So it's a good thing to have. I get a lot of laugh in this kind of nervous stage of fear. I get quite a laugh watching people giggling on a hill before they go, that little bit of shaking. You watch someone grab their A risers and their hands are shaking and the wobbles are going down the lines. It's good. It's a good thing. There's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed of. It's a great thing to have. It means we're focused. It means we're taking it seriously. We're concentrating on what we're doing. Much better than a blasé or a cocky pilot. I don't see many of them, but I have had a few along the road in my career. They're the ones who worry me because it means they don't have a respect. They don't have a healthy fear gene, whatever you want to call it. They are not respecting what they're doing. They're not either not realizing or not caring about the danger they may well be putting themselves in if they're not concentrated, if they're not taking it seriously. And actually, those are the pilots that I worry much more about. So being on the hill, feeling a little bit nervous, totally normal. And you kind of sit there and you watch the more experienced pilots around you, and you kind of go, "Well, are they feeling as nervous as me? Is everybody on this hillside as absolutely terrified as me?" Um, Possibly in different ways. For sure, the more experienced you get, the better you can handle with fear. The more you understand, the more you know. As we said before, fear generally is not understanding something. If we don't understand something, we can't comprehend something, then we start to get fearful of it. If we understand it, the more experience we get, the more understanding we get, then the better we are equipped to deal with it. So fear is a really relative thing. Some people will be very fearful, nervous, excited about their launching. It's a windy day. We're attached to the world's biggest kite. And we all know if we don't get our launch right on a windy day, there's the risk of us being dragged up launch on our face through the nearest cowpat. It has happened to me. Again, I've got my hand in the air. I'm not quite sure why, but that's happened to me. It's kind of happened to most pilots, I believe, at some time or the other. It's part and parcel of the fun. So the first thing we've got to look at is that nervous, is it fear? Am I putting myself, are the conditions too strong? Am I putting myself into a situation where actually I can't handle it? And the fear gene is, I keep calling it a gene. I'm not really sure if it's a gene or not. The fear thing, should we say? And I can't get told off by anyone more scientific than me. Is the fear thing actually my body, my subconscious, whatever it might be, trying to tell me that I am in imminent danger and I should actually stop doing this now? If I stand on the edge of a very tall building, I get a very, not that I've done it that many times, but I get a very, you get a very funny feeling. Your body is telling you if you were to step off this right now, it wouldn't end well. Paragliding, your body may still be able maybe trying to tell you the same thing. So it may be saying that the conditions aren't good. Maybe that you're seeing something, and should you be doing it at the moment, or is it just plain nervousness of looking silly? Are we worried about being dragged in front of all of our friends or in front of other people on the hillside? So it's really good to kind of quantify our fear, to put it in a box, to know whether it's a genuine fear. Am I feeling this fear, as I said, because I'm in imminent danger? Or am I feeling this fear because I don't want to be dragged on my face through a barbed wire fence over a cowpat and look silly in front of everyone on the hill? If we start to quantify, we put our fear into boxes, then we can start to deal with it a bit better. We can go, no, don't be silly. Maybe if I am a little bit worried or nervous of looking silly, maybe it's because I'm trying to push myself, or maybe I'm not practiced enough. There's other things you can do. Okay, if it's a windy day and I'm not feeling confident with my ground handling, well, then that suggests there's something I can do about it. I can go ground handling. I can improve my skills. We can start to identify the fear and nervousness we're feeling. But some of it is just, it's an adrenaline sport. It's going to kick off a bit of adrenaline. When I sit in the boat in Olodeniz in Turkey, which is a very famous place for doing SIV courses, so there's a lot of SIV instructors bobbing around the sea on the boat. And when we haven't got pilots flying out, we're kind of just sat watching the turtles or watching other pilots come down. It's a great front row seat for some of the acro that goes on. Some of the world's best pilots go and do their thing. And also a lot of people go there that are learning. So it's quite an entertaining place to sit and watch. There are also hundreds and hundreds of tandems coming out a day. And what's very, very funny is I'll be sitting in a boat, writing up my notes, and all I can hear above me is, and it's of course, for the tandems, they've got to do this all, and they're coming out from 5.5, 6,000 feet. So they've got to spice up their day a little bit. So they start doing some wing overs and some spiral dives. And of course, you've got the plucky passenger who's experiencing this for the first time, who's just gone from an incredibly tall launch out for their first ever tandem in what is a beautiful place. just getting used to paragliding being very serene, gentle and boaty, and then all of a sudden they're being wanged around in wingovers, in spiral dives, putting a bit of G-force, wind noise, something probably more extreme than they've ever experienced in their life before. And out comes that kind of nervous fear, that giggling. Is a lot of giggling. Make it stop! It's brilliant, absolutely entertaining. And that impression, by the way, was, I must say, having spent many years in my boat in Holidays, boys actually scream at a higher pitch than girls, sometimes at a pitch that only dogs could hear. There have been many times I've heard a really high-pitched scream coming down, and as a spiraling down. And then when I've looked up, it's been a really big, hairy bloke. So fear manifests itself a lot of the time in that kind of, it makes you spontaneously scream, giggle, whatever it is. It's a good thing. It's a really good thing to have. So that kind of fear is cool. And don't worry, everybody gets it. It's a lot of it is relative. Okay, so maybe the more experienced pilot won't be nervous about launching anymore. Launching, they've got down. But maybe they're going on a cross-country flight. They're going to be dealing with some rougher conditions. The more experienced we get, the bigger conditions, obviously safely, but the bigger conditions we can fly in, the more we're going to push ourselves, the more we're going to go maybe into territory that's not as easy to retrieve, not as easy to land in. So fear, the same feeling will manifest itself in pilots in many different situations. As I said, it's a very relative thing, but we're all experiencing it in the same way. There are some lovely flights that I do personally. Ridge soaring at a beach site in smooth air in the evening when the sun's going down, I absolutely love. It's brilliant. But equally, I like to have the balance. I like to have some really nice, easy flights where I don't really have to worry about anything. The takeoff's easy, the flying's easy, the landing's easy. Equally, I quite like to have a little bit of pressure. I quite like, as I said, to have that nervous feeling, because nerves reminds me, makes me feel that I'm alive. So it's a good thing to have. So really, really can't stress enough that fear is a good thing to have. Don't you worry. It's brilliant. It's good to talk about. I always talk, if someone asks me, and quite often my pilots or students will say, it's all right for you guys, me and Akis, we always fly together. I joke, I call Akis the Iceman, because he's absolutely clinical, cool, calm and collective in the air, never really shows any emotion, gets on, does the job. But when they are, they say, oh, it's all right for you guys. I can't wait to get to your position where you're not scared anymore. And both of us immediately have to say, we both get scared. We're human. Everybody gets scared. No one likes being in a washing machine. I don't like being in a really rough patch of air, getting my ass kicked around the sky any more than the next person. Again, the more experienced you get, the more current you are, the better you are at dealing with it. So I have a lot of confidence in my own skills to control a glider, but it doesn't mean I'm not scared. Something I do, I know when I'm getting scared, because people say, and it's a funny question, but it kind of makes a bit of sense. How do you know when you're getting scared? For me, I can tell, and I know that sounds stupid, but actually, and you watch yourself now. If you're really concentrated on what's going on, air's being rough, whatever it might be, you might find yourself sitting forward, sitting up. So I fly in my cross-country kit, I fly in a pod harness, so I'm quite laid back. It's really good for long flights, super comfortable. But when things are getting a little bit funky, or I'm getting a little bit nervous about something, I'm getting a little bit fearful, for whatever reason that might be, I find myself sitting up. And I suddenly catch myself sitting up, and then I realise, if I find myself sitting up, then I know I'm taking this, whatever's going on, a little bit more seriously now, because I've suddenly found myself sitting up in the risers. And I've noticed that a lot in the sky, talking to other pilots, that one of our first natural instincts is to sit up in the riser. So if you catch yourself doing that, then you're starting to get nervous or worried or whatever it might be about something. But that's certainly a way that I catch myself. So fear's good. There is a lot of nervousness, as I said. There's a lot of nervousness when we're trying a new maneuver, we're doing something for the first time. But again, that's good. It's enjoyable. And what we've got to recognize, and we've got to start to recognize the enjoyable fear that we can, I don't ever mean ignore, but we can override. We can do things about. We can get things sorted in our own flying, in our own mind, and we can deal with it, and we can get more experience, more current at it. We can tackle it kind of head on, and we can reduce the level of nervousness or fear that we have by increasing the level of understanding that we have. So far we've seen that actually fear is okay. Nothing to be ashamed of, something that we can certainly talk about, that we should talk about, and that we should certainly understand is an okay thing to have. However, there are more serious situations that can pop up. where the fear response can kick in and it can be quite serious. We are in a situation where we might be at risk of injury, serious injury, or worse. And that's a fear response that we really need to listen to. The thing with paragliding is we can never give up. Once our feet leave the ground or once something starts to happen, we cannot just become a passenger. It's something I talk about a lot to my students is we must remain a pilot and never be a passenger. We must pilot our aircraft all the way down to the ground. Um, Incidences can happen on launch as well as in the air. Remember, when we're close to the ground, this is actually the time when we're at our most vulnerable because it's the ground that hurts. If we're 5,000 feet in the air, then we've got a lot more time to sort things out. But when we're close to the ground, be it on launch or be it when we're coming into land, that's the time when if something happens, we've got to get on it quite quickly. We've got to manage our emotions, manage our fear, and react and try and sort the problem. And certainly not become a passenger, always remain a pilot. What I've seen in the years, whether it's teaching students on their first day, their first soaring flight, first thermaling flights, maybe people doing acro, or people doing cross country, doing SIV, is fear tends to manifest itself in pilots for me, in four different categories. Number one is the panicker. Number two is the pilot who's a freezer. Number three would be the pilot who's a thinker. And number four are the time slows downies, if that makes any sense. What do I mean by that? So I've seen lots of people over the time. I have also been one of those people, as I said, I've been flying for 13, 14 years and I've had my fair share of whoopsies and what have you along the way. And I've seen pilots react to things in very specific ways in these four categories. The panicker. The panicker, it kind of goes without saying, the panicker is someone who panics. But what does that mean? And what you might find is see if you can recognize yourself in any of these categories that I'm about to describe now. So the panicker is the guy or gal, whoever it might be, is the pilot who something will happen, whether they get picked up and twisted the wrong way on launch, or they have a big asymmetric deflation, maybe it cravats, maybe a situation is developing they don't understand, maybe they've got riser twisted, I don't know. There's a plethora of horrible things that may happen that may induce our proper kind of fear gene. And the panicker is someone who overreacts, who doesn't really understand the situation, isn't really sure what to do, but the adrenaline is flowing. That speeds by nature. That's our fight or flight response. And by nature, everything speeds up. We start tugging at the controls, putting wild inputs in, inputs that really aren't effective in the situation that's going on. We're not really conscious or understanding of what the situation is. We're just kind of yanking at the controls, hoping something will happen. Of course, the panicker situation isn't a great situation because what can actually happen, what I've seen happen many times, is we make the initial situation a lot worse. We create a secondary situation. And in many of the times I've seen paragliding go wrong. I've seen unfortunate accidents, or I've seen things develop on an SIV run. It's from a pilot panicking, putting unneeded or over forceful control inputs in, mismanaging the energy from an initial situation, creating a secondary situation that then actually turns into something a lot more serious. So the panic response is not a great response to have at all. We lose our rational thinking and we tend to go a bit wild on the controls. We're not sure what's going on. Oh my God, everything's blurring around us. And yeah, not going to work out well if we continue to do that. We're certainly not going to be able to get the problem sorted very easily. The freezer, obviously, again, as it sounds, completely opposite almost to the panicker. It's still a kind of, the two are quite closely linked. For me, it's still a panic reaction. However, instead of overreacting to a situation, we actually do nothing. Again, we kind of lose all rational thought. We don't understand the situation. So instead of being able to do something about it, we do nothing. We are that analogy you've probably heard of, the rabbit in the headlights. So something will happen. The pilot will sit there. Things start to escalate around them. The speed may come on. The airspeed may increase. The glider may start doing something they completely don't understand, don't recognize. Maybe the G-force starts coming on, and they completely freeze. Fear takes over. I used to get it not very often, but at times with my students flying out on their first high flights. And you'd say, come on then, Bob, make a right turn or a left turn, whatever it might be. And Bob just carries on flying straight. And once again, we say, Bob, you need to make a right turn now, come away from the alligator farm. And Bob would just keep heading towards the alligator farm. Can you make a left turn, Bob? Can we do something, please? Because you're heading right towards the alligator farm. And the pilot basically will just become overloaded with things that are going on, things they don't understand, rational thinking. They can't really process anything. And so then we get this freeze response. Again, if you have the freeze response, you basically become a passenger. You've relinquished control of the glider in whatever situation it might be, and you've become a passenger. Again, a potentially very dangerous situation to occur. The third is the thinker. Now, thinker's not too bad. Thinking can be good, but it depends. It's a time critical section, this one. Being a thinker means that we don't do anything for a while. We take our time to think about the situation and then react to it. If we've got time, if we've got a lot of height, the situation isn't something too bad that it's escalating, into a more serious situation. Speed is picking up, G-force is picking up, whatever it might be. If we have time to think about a problem, well, obviously that's better than panicking and creating a secondary problem or putting a wrong input in. It's better than freezing because we're actually taking part, we're thinking about it, and we're trying to address the situation. However, thinkers can get completely transfixed on the problem and forget everything else around them. A couple of great examples that I've seen on SIV courses are people doing stuff, getting into a bit of a pickle. And I have a certain cutoff that if we go past that point for safety reasons, I ask people maybe then to throw their reserve. Okay, we can't sort it out now. We're not going to make the beach. We're picking up speed, whatever it might be. Please throw your reserve, and I get nothing. And I can see them sitting there. They're not flapping. They're not panicking. Maybe they've frozen. It's sometimes difficult to tell, but they're sitting there looking up at the glider. And then eventually, I use a varying different commands to try and break through that kind of block out, that whiteout that they're experiencing as they're thinking about the situation. They snap out of it. We get it sorted, whatever it might be. Either they throw the reserve, they regain control, whatever it might be. And when I spoke to them afterwards, what they've been doing is they've been looking, going, yeah, I could hear you saying that, but if I pulled this one and I pulled this line, I was going to sort it out. I knew I could sort it out. What I didn't realise is how much height they were losing, the area that they were in. It's no good whizzing around in a very fast auto-rotation or spiral dive, whatever you want to call it, and hitting the water really hard because you'd forgotten how much height, you'd forgotten that you were losing height very quickly. You were thinking about the problem. You've got to be aware of your surroundings. So thinking about it is good, but you've also got to have a look over your shoulder, make sure you've got the height. Make sure that you're not drifting into an area that would cause you more problems, that creates a secondary incident, something that makes you or puts you more danger. So thinking is good, but thinking also, I mean, if we're getting picked up and we're twisted around on the ground, for example, we're twisted the wrong way and we're shooting across the side of the hill, again, thinking, okay, now, if I pull my right brake here, that should get off. We've already hit the stone wall. We've already hit the hillside. Again, we've got to be conscious of the time that we have and our position, where we are in relation to the ground and the glider. So thinking isn't a bad thing, but we just need to be aware. Then the time slows downers. This is something I discovered I was in what I would call my most serious incident in paragliding. I was mucking around. I was doing some acro. I was over water. I was over a river. We've got to remember, just because we're over water doesn't always mean that we're actually safe, that we're going to walk away with no problem and make a cup of tea. It was the end of the day. There was 1,000 things wrong with my decision to fly. I was tired. I've been sort of mucking about, training all day. We were doing some towing with a great lad in Argentina. We've been having a lot of fun. It was great. It'd been a really, really good training day. Lots of sun. Was just feeling generally tired. Was swinging in the hammock. Already told myself that I wasn't going to fly. Anyway, for various reasons, got convinced to go up. To do one more flight, record a silly video for some friends of the guy who was towing us, offered me a free tow, and I thought, oh, go on then. So I went, towed up, no problem. Beautiful sunset evening. I was in shorts and t-shirt, towing up, having a look around me. All the way up, I was almost a passenger then. I'd been towing all day. I knew what I was doing. So the glider and me were on autopilot. I was looking around, enjoying the view. I wasn't really switched on. At that point, I should have recognised I didn't have my normal level of focus. Anyway, got to the top, pulled the tow off, released myself from the cable, got myself into position. I remember feeling I was just being very lazy. Got myself in, did the maneuver they wanted me to do, a sat where I let go of the supporting hand, and hey, look, you can do a sat without the supporting hand, and all that nonsense. That's all I had to do. All I had to do then was come out of that, go and land, have the barbecue, carry on about our evening. But I thought, while I was in the sat, well, I'll pull it through, try a connection, sat to heli, and And again, I was being lazy as I did it, and I pulled it round, woof, and I lost control of the glider. A really ropey late input, got riser twisted. Suddenly a cravat came on, and the glider immediately, and it was an acro glider, a very small acro glider. So it went very fast into an auto rotation. And suddenly, for my very relaxed, lazy, woof, not really taking it seriously, when the G-force kicked in and the auto rotation started, I sprang to life, shall we say. The adrenaline kicked in. My fear response kicked in. Fortunately for me, I'm a time slows downer. So all of a sudden, with the adrenaline going, my brain started thinking really, really quickly at a speed I wish I could do in my normal life. And unfortunately, as to date, I have not found a way, apart from my putting myself in a perilous situation where I can get my mind to think that quickly. However, everything started happening. The G-force was strong and getting stronger and stronger. I was whizzing around the sky. Everything was a blur. And I knew I was in trouble. There was no way could I recover the glider. I need to go for my reserve. So I was quite calm at this point. I knew what I needed to do. I've lost control of the glider. I need to go for my reserve. Now, we all sit in harness hangers. We all talk about it. I do the same with my students. To throw a reserve, we reach down, grab the handle, pop it out, swing it, throw it away. Yep, that's brilliant. When you're flying straight and level or you're in a classroom, that's awesome. Now try doing that with 4G, crushing your body into the seat and with the glider whizzing around in an auto rotation. Not so easy, I can tell you. So I managed to get my hand on the handle. I just couldn't pull it. I could pull it up a little bit, but the G-force was so strong, the centrifugal force was so strong, it sucked my arm in. So I started to panic. Now the feeling of panic started to, the fear response went from fear, okay, it's almost like automatic training. Okay, I've lost the glider. I need to get to my reserve. Hand goes down, hand on the reserve. Everything's going to plan at this point. Start pulling. Oh my gosh, I don't have the strength of my hand to pull it out to be able to get the handle out. Panic sets in. So now the panic response sets in a bit. I need to curb that and recognize that immediately, which I did. So the panic response kicks in. I can feel, in the back of my head now it said, I'm in a dangerous situation. This actually is going to need sorting. What are you going to do about it? Then came the thinking stage. So I'm thinking, okay, what can I do? Bear in mind, all this time, I am losing height quick and quicker. First thing I do then is I look, where am I? Luckily, this happened at the top of the run, and I was getting about 3,500 feet off the toe, maybe a touch more. So at this point, I have time. The river isn't anywhere near me at this point. I know I've got time. My other concern was with all this G-force, luckily in acrobatic flying, you become accustomed to G-force and strain. That's okay. But this is going to be going on for quite some time. It takes a little while to come down from 3,500 feet. And could I hold that G-force long enough? I felt okay at the moment, but the forces were building. So I managed to get my hand over with both hands, pop the reserve out. Okay, I felt at this point quite pleased with myself. Already you can hear there's a lot of thinking going on. This all happened and I had my GoPro strapped to my head like every good, or not my head, actually, I tell a lie, it was on my knee. I was going to say like all good acro pilots or pilots do. I don't put things on my helmet because they are for me it's a hazard. So it was on my knee. Anyway, when you're watching this, it all happens in a flash, in a couple of seconds. But all the stuff I was thinking at that time, and I was controlling that fear of emotion. I was recognizing panic coming in. At no point did I freeze. There was no point sort of trying to pull my handle and going, oh my God, it's not coming out. Well, that's me done. That's when the freeze response could kick into someone. They've tried something, it's not working. Oh my God, what do? I don't know what to do. And you sit there. Right. So panic response, I'd managed to recognize and quell quite early. The freeze response for me was never going to happen. I need to do something about this. The thinking response is good, but I was aware of my surroundings. I looked around. I've still got the height. I can do something about this, but chop, chop, let's get it done. So I grab the handle, pull it out. There is absolutely no way, again, like you're trained to do, like I tell my pilots to do, that you can throw this reserve away at the moment. The only thing I could do was let go of the handle and drop it. So I did. Then I watched the reserve disappear out of my hand, which is a wonderful feeling at this point. Again, this is all happening in seconds. It's taking me an hour to explain it, but it all happened in seconds. As I watch my reserve go away, the bride will start to come out. It was a joyous feeling, and I'm waiting for the big pop as my reserve opens. Here we go. I've got to get my glider in, land in the water, feel a little bit silly because I've just thrown my reserve in front of all my friends on the side of the river, but that's great. As I watch my reserve just start to come out the bag, along comes my leading edge in the auto rotation, and like a great white shark, eats it. And suddenly my initial fear of elation, watching my reserve come out, gets eaten by the leading edge. What fear response do you think came in then? Exactly, panic. Absolute panic. I would say at this point, almost sheer terror, because I only had one reserve. At this point, and again, a mistake. when you're flying acro, if you're doing any kind of maneuvers, you want to start really messing about with gliders, you always should have a second option. I've learnt that now, and I almost learnt that the hard way. I had my one reserve, and as it was about to open, the great white shark on my leading edge ate it, boff. And now I'm in locked auto rotation, and now the river seems like it's coming up. Absolute panic started to set in. For a moment, maybe I almost froze. What am I going to do? What do I do about this now? My only chance of saviour here is now resting in my leading edge. So panic isn't going to do me any good. Again, I'm now struggling a bit more to quell that fear because it's really strong, because I am in a properly desperate situation now. I don't have any other tricks up my sleeve. I'm not going to freeze. I've got to fly your aircraft all the way to the ground. I've been saying that to my students in whatever type of aviation I'm doing. You fly your aircraft all the way to the ground. Thinking, I need to start thinking quick because the ground is coming up. But again, things are happening so fast. And when you watch all this on the GoPro, all of this happened within about 30 seconds. I even had enough time while this was going on, just for a minute, to have this little feeling of disappointment. And what a shame. As I'm whizzing around, I can't really see because I'm going around so fast, but I see a bit of sunset. And I remember thinking, what a shame. It's such a lovely evening. The air temperature was so nice. And because I was whizzing around so fast, I remember thinking, it's not cold. Isn't the air a lovely temperature? And isn't it a shame that, it was the stillness of a beautiful sunset evening. All around me was a beautiful, still sunset evening. In my world, things are going catastrophically wrong. And I'm starting to think at this speed, maybe I'll survive, but this is going to be a hard impact into the water. This is going to be terrible. And what a shame it is. And I had this moment of real serenity, real calmness, as I thought about this situation, this impending situation, with this beautifully lovely, warm summer's evening air and the beautiful sunset that's whizzing around me at 100 miles an hour. And then I managed to snap myself back into reality. I grabbed hold of my bridle, gave a really hard tug, and thankfully, fortunately for me, the reserve popped out of the leading edge. Poof! That reassuring poof as it opened. You can imagine the sounds. I was going around so fast. That little tug, that shock poof tug of my shoulders, my bridle's on my shoulder attachments, and suddenly sereneness again. It's all over. It's done. I am now coming down under my reserve. I only had about 600 feet to go, so it was very close, very, very close. But I was coming down, no problem, managed to get my glider in. And again, once it was all over, all of a sudden the fear and panic turned to a little feel of elation, although it was, that was a serious moment, so I couldn't just get myself back to normality. But I do remember then, again, and I came out, it was like the end of a movie, facing the sun, just going down in the river. And I just remember for a moment just floating on the reserve, again thinking what a beautiful moment that was. And then I plopped into the really nice warm water of the river, and a really strong lesson learned. But I experienced during that scenario all 4 categories of fear responses. So it's really important, if you recognize yourself in any of those fear responses, to try and recognize which one you are, and to try and deal with it, not let yourself become a panicker and lose yourself to panic, or lose yourself to freezing, or be a thinker but take too long to think and not recognize your surroundings. Being able to make decisions based on your environment that you're in at that time. And if you're a time slowsy downer, that's really good. It actually gives you a chance, to think about things very quickly, to react, to be able to deal with your fears, any of the categories that are coming at you, and hopefully keep yourself safe. Okay, to round off the show today, we're going to have a quick chat with Jack Pimblett, a pilot who's got a lot of experience at dealing with the fear and emotion that goes with paragliding. Jack's a team pilot for Advance and a professional acro pilot. On his first season coming into to the world of professional acro flying and comp flying, he came in as world number 8. So he's got a lot of experience in dealing with the mental side, the fear side, the emotional side. Not just in acro, but also in XC flying. Jack's flown in some quite high-level XC comps. So let's have a chat with Jack and see how he deals with the subject of fear. So we've got Jack on the line. How you doing, Jack?
Hello. I'm all good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Another day stuck in the hangar. How about you?
That's it, mate. We are allowed to go outside today. We're allowed to travel to go exercise for unlimited amounts of time, but still I find myself bound behind the desk editing videos. I look out the window now to my right and I see howling winds, so nothing's changed there. However, we have had the most flyable April that I can remember in my lifetime, so it's been pretty torturous.
Always the way. I mean, it's nice to look out the window and actually see it's not flyable.
Yeah.
It kind of eases the pain slightly, only slightly, but slightly.
That's it. I mean, as we talked about before, as soon as that ban is lifted, as soon as the CAA and BHPA give us the green light, I'm sure it's going to rain for the next 73 nights. So
You can guarantee. I would put money on that. Absolutely guaranteed. You just wait and watch. What it does, though, while we're stuck on the ground, while we're stuck in the hangar, so to speak, is it gives us a little bit more time to chat about paragliding, to dream about paragliding. And
definitely,
as you know, something that we've been talking about in the podcast today, quite an important subject, I believe, the subject of fear. You know, something that I believe that every single pilot has gone through, will go through, is going through in their paragliding career. It's something I think that's really, really important in paragliding. And it's really important for a paraglider pilot to understand, to appreciate, to kind of experience. What's your thoughts on fear, Jack?
it's necessary, absolutely necessary. It keeps us alive, keeps us aware of what's going on. And, if, in my opinion, if we're not scared, we're becoming complacent. And complacency is one of the biggest killers in the sport, or the biggest factor in injuries. So, my dad always used to say to me before every takeoff, whether it is tandem flying or it was when he was teaching me to fly, it was like, are you nervous? I would say yes, and he would say good. And that was just to check that I wasn't getting complacent, I wasn't too eager to get into the air, and that I was in the right headspace to press on with some flying that day. And yeah, I just think it's necessary. It keeps us on our toes, and at the end of the day, paragliding is inherently dangerous, so we just need to keep our wits about us, really.
Brilliant. Absolutely agree. And it's exactly the kind of thing that I've been saying earlier on as well. Having a little bit of fear is a good thing. And it actually kind of, it's what gives some of the enjoyment as well. If it was just ho hum, we turn up on the hill, we go for a flight with no real excitement or emotion involved, it would take some of the thrill. I mean, the word thrill, for example, it would take some of the emotion away. It would be a pretty boring thing to do. So I think fear, in a way, especially when we do it, you conquer that fear. You feel like you're alive.
Absolutely. If it wasn't there, we wouldn't want to do it, essentially, because it would just be like playing chess or some other mundane activity. And whilst I do like chess as much as the next man, it is better to be outside under a paraglider sometimes, scaring yourself a little bit too senseless, and then you find yourself back on the ground, kissing the ground, and life goes on. But fear is necessary for the enjoyment, for the safety, and for the overall sport in general, really.
Absolutely. And it's a thing that I think it's all a relative thing depending on your experience, but fear is something I believe that never actually goes away. So when you first start paragliding, you have fear associated with doing your first flights, clipping yourself in, the very, very, what seems like basic stuff to us now. But when you're first learning to paraglide, trying to sort your lines out, your feet leaving the ground, it's one of the only aviation sports where we actually leave the ground for the first time on our own. You have the controls from day one. And
Yeah,
as you get more experienced, you kind of lose the fear through each section. But then as you go on to the next section, you have fear of that, for example. So for you, I mean, I doubt whether clipping into a glider and sorting your lines out gives you any fear anymore. But when you're doing the kind of level of acro that you're doing, and you're doing the kind of tricks you're doing, I mean, you do the majority of the tricks twisted now. How have you found that the fear has carried on with you as you've progressed? Have you found that the fear progresses kind of with you?
that
How has it been for someone at your level?
that's it. It does kind of move on with you, and the way I look at it is that fear of the unknown is what makes us scared. And I was lucky to learn that quite early on in my life. I mean, I've been exposed to so many different sports, adventure sports throughout my life, and I can only thank my dad for that. But that gave me a really healthy respect towards my fear, and I learned that it was just a fear of the unknown. And half of the time, I want to be on the other side of that fear of the unknown to learn with what I was dealing and to feel the thrill of it. So I relate the same emotion, the same fear of doing my first full stalls over Lake Garda to now learning the first super stall to infinite. It's just that fear of the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to go into my glider? Am I going to break a few lines? That is what I'm looking at these days. But yeah, it's just a fear of the unknown for me. And even though now I might not get particularly nervous at clipping in and getting my lines sorted, I still get nervous driving to the hill, mate. Driving up the hill for the first
Yeah,
time, you see those
yeah.
clouds, and it's just the anticipation for me. I'm so excited to be able to go and fly and to be doing something that not many people get the fortune of doing throughout their life, that I do get very much nervous in preparation for flight and throughout flying. So as I said, it's just the fear of the unknown. It progresses as you progress within the sport, and everyone should be happy to have fear involved in their sport and not be embarrassed at all. I mean, that's only something that I've realised is a thing in the sport in the last couple of years, really, and that is that people are ashamed of their fear.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost in some groups that I've seen or in some experiences I've had on the hill, it's almost like a taboo subject. It's something that people are ashamed of, embarrassed about, that people try and cover up, people try and hide. I mean, you can't cover it up. You and me have both been on the hill long enough that you can see very easily. You can tell a pilot that's nervous. You can tell a pilot that's scared, that has the element of fear, and you can tell the pilot is trying to cover it up. So it's the best thing to do is be completely honest about it. And this is what I'm really hoping that this podcast that we do now does, is it gets the point across that, it's everyone goes through it. It's part and parcel. And actually it's quite an enjoyable part if we harness it in the right way. You're exactly right, Jack, that fear is generally of the unknown. And once we get more experienced and more knowledgeable and we start to understand things, the fear to a degree lessens. However, one question I've really got for you. So the fear of doing new tricks and learning new tricks is one thing, but how do you deal with the fear in comp? So, I mean, when you came onto the scene on your first comp season, you've already got a bit of pressure on your shoulders because it's your first comp season. Everyone knew that you've been working up to it, that you were flying at an incredibly high level. How do you keep your composure and deal with the fear? Because you can tell us, is it a different fear when you're out competing? Because you know what's coming, it's not of the unknown, you know what's coming. Does the fear feel the same? Do you deal with it in the same way? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It is difficult. But I deal with fear in so many different ways. One way is that I'm very aware of the fact that if I'm cold, I'm very nervous. So whether I'm in a comp or whether I'm flying day to day or I get to skydive or whatever, I always make sure that I'm warm. So on a cross-country flight, whatever it may be, I'll probably have 2 or 3 more layers on than I need. And that's just because I'd rather be sweating than be freezing, because I know that I'll be able to make the right decisions when it comes down to it. Then the other fear is that the other way I can deal with fear is playing music. And I play that because it just deals with your conscious mind and enables you to listen to music with your conscious mind and let your subconscious deal with it all. So that's one way of dealing with fear for me. And I play music throughout all of my training. I wish I did in comps, to be honest.
Would you be allowed to? Would it be a thing? Would you be allowed to? I mean, could you go up with a Bluetooth speaker in the middle of the Son Show comp, for example, and play whatever music it is you're choosing to play? Mary Poppins or The Sound of Music, whatever it is acro pilots have up there.
Absolutely. There would be no rules against that. And it'd probably make me a much better pilot. I'd probably be able to finish, I don't know, first, something like that. I'd be much better. The thing is for me is that I back myself quite a lot when it comes to flying on the hill in Orgagna, in my kind of safe space, as it were. And I rate myself in terms of the acro pilots that we have around at the minute. But when it comes to actually competing, it's quite hard to then reflect your ability on the training site, the place that you live maybe for 3 or 4 months of the year, and then to perform on the world stage. And sometimes in the case of Shonshire, in front of 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000 people. So that's what's a little bit nerve-wracking, because you may have the pressures of trying to perform not only for yourself, for your sponsors, and trying to basically prove yourself. For me, I just want to show what I can achieve and what I can do. And if I don't reflect my ability on that particular performance, that's what gets me down, really. It's never about placement for me. It's like if I really put down a killer run and I think I did my best, then I don't care where I come in terms of placement. But if I put down like my worst run and I still come 4th or 5th, then it really disappoints me, because I know I have the ability to get higher than that,
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a lot of pressure to deal with, eh? It's another, we're not scared of clipping in anymore. We're not scared of sorting our lines out or making the flight. But we're still, at whatever level you're at, there is still something in your flying. If you're pushing yourself to improve, for example, in whatever style of flying that might be, there's always that pressure, that nervousness, that thing you've got to deal with. That's half the reason I'm sure that we do it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, if it was a boring sport, we wouldn't want to be involved with it, would we? And I think if you look at a lot of the people that are involved with paragliding, they are, I wouldn't say thrill seekers or adrenaline junkies, but they do look for some sort of balance between risk and reward. So you end up with these people that do seem to risk a little bit to get a little bit back. And, if we weren't getting any of that reward for the risk, then it would be a very boring sport, soulless sport.
Absolutely. The final question I've got on this subject with you, Jack, and it's a question that people ask me quite a lot, and for me, they get it completely. They understand it completely the wrong way round. So people say to me, which I'm going to ask you now: do you find acro or XC more scary? And then immediately, what they'll say to me is the acro must be more scary because you're flipping over your glider, or you're doing negative maneuvers, you're doing helicopters, you're spinning around. And I always say, actually, I find for me personally, XC is a little bit more scary because acro is calculated, and I mean, saying it's controlled is a bit ironic. Is a little bit contrary because we are trying at all costs to stop our glider flying. Acro is basically finding as many different ways to stop your glider flying as possible. But you know what's going on most of the time. You're in control of it. You're making it happen. You've got all the safety nets, or you should have all the safety nets in place all the time. XC for me has a massive random factor of things that are outside of my control, and I personally find XC a bit more scary. What's it to you? I mean, you've done both, and you've done both at quite a high level.
You've hit the nail on the head. I've been in the fortunate position to go and attend a few cross country comps, and now I've been in acro for quite some time now. But for me, XC is definitely far more scary, and I've been able to fly XC on two liners, the very high kind of aspect ratio comp wings, all the way down to ENAs and EMBs, and still for me the cross country aspect of flying is far more scary. And that's just because there's more of the fear of the unknown. You don't know whether you're going to make it to the next valley. Are you going to be stuck in some sort of compression where you're going to end up blowing backwards or whatever? You just don't know. Whereas most of my acro life and stuff like that is in a safety net. I'm doing the same tricks day in, day out for months at a time, hundreds of hours a year, and I have all the same safety nets in place. When I'm in Organya, I'm 4,000 feet above the floor. I've got the same glider I've flown all season. I've got the same harness I've flown for the last 2-3 years, and I've got 3 rescues on me. So if I mess up this trick that I'm unfamiliar with, then I've got 3 backups. I've got 4,000 feet of air to sort out, and things that I've relied on for the last 5 years. Whereas when you're flying cross country, you've only maybe got 1 rescue, or when I was competing, I had 2 rescues. But you're just covering so much terrain that is out of the way of hospitals, out of the way of main roads sometimes, and you're just in a lot of unforgiving territory at times.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's a question that a lot of people get the wrong way around for me. They look at acro and they think that it's acro that has the risk. And actually, like we've just said, I think for me, because of exactly how you said, it's the unknown. It's the unknown that brings in the fear. And there is a lot more of that in XC flying. There's a lot more random factors in terms of where you happen to be flying, exactly as you said. Yeah, I totally agree with that one, Jack.
I think it comes down to accessibility, really.
Yeah.
In the UK, we've got so many good XC sites, and everyone's flying XC, whether it's just their first XC and they've climbed up to cloud base and gone 5 kilometers over the back, or someone is an XC hand and they've done 100, 200k, whatever it is. It's just really accessible. Acro isn't accessible in the UK, and so when they don't know many people that do it, they just assume that we're some sort of adrenaline junkie that craves a bit of risk and doesn't really know what they're doing. So,
true.
It's just one of those.
You're spot on, Mr. Jack. So one last question, Jack, if I may, and for everyone that's been listening to the podcast today, what would be your advice to pilots on how to deal with fear?
I would say don't overthink would be my answer to that, because we see, especially in SIV, a lot of over-piloting, a lot of overthinking. And you just need to learn to trust yourself, trust the equipment, trust the safety measures you've put in place, trust your training, and trust the instructor that you're with at the time, or maybe the advice that you've been given, So we get it on so many occasions where a student's scared to do one maneuver, understandably so. And then once they've come in and landed and they've done the maneuver, they're like, wow, that was brilliant. And it wasn't so scary. And you're like, well done. And, they're happy and you're happy and stuff like that. And usually they can then go on and carry on to overcome a lot of the other stuff they do on the course. But if they were to just not overthink and try and tackle their problems head first, it would solve a lot, really. And I always say, try and remember the feeling of the success, because if you remember the feeling of what it was like to overcome the fear of the unknown, then usually you can channel that into overcoming that fear again.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah, completely. I mean, people can end up doing their own minds in by overthinking stuff, and they start creating these scenarios in their head that haven't even happened, or they start making these scenarios happen in their head. And if you're not careful, you can actually self-perpetuate these situations, and you almost create them by overthinking and overthinking and overthinking. Spot on as always, Mr. Jack.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you on this one. We shall catch up with you on the next one for sure.
Thanks a lot, mate. It's been great speaking to you.
You too, buddy. Take care, and hopefully we can get out and actually, instead of talking about flying, we can do some flying very soon.
Oh, it'd be lovely to fly with you again, mate.
Oh, wouldn't it? Lovely, Jack. Catch you soon, buddy.
Catch you later, mate. Speak to you later.
Bye-bye. Really lovely to catch up with Jack Pimblett there. Some really interesting thoughts and ideas and opinions on today's subject of fear. Quite a serious subject we've talked about today, but as I keep saying, a really important one. Do remember, as we said in the show, that to tackle fear, to tackle your fears, the best way to do it absolutely is to tackle them head on. Don't be afraid to face your fears. Don't be afraid to practice things that scare you a little bit in paragliding, the things you're worried about. The sooner you tackle them, the more you practice them, the more educated you get with them, the more experienced you get with them, the less these certain parts of your flying will scare you, and the less fear you'll have, and subsequently the more enjoyment you have. So the best advice we can take away from today's show is tackle your fears head on. Listen to your fear, understand when it's fear that is telling you to stop, or it's telling you that you're in mortal danger, and recognize the fear that we can do something about, that we can go ground handling, we can go out flying more, we can get a little bit more educated, we can read the books, talk to the instructors, watch the films, get the advice, get that experience to conquer our fears, and ultimately enjoy our sport a whole lot more. Must give a quick thank you to Stefan Kartenberg for our funky little tune, The Vendetta, the theme music to our debrief podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that you've managed to get something out of it, and I hope, really, really hope, that you've appreciated that fear is okay to have. It's part and parcel of the sport we do. It's part of the reason that we do the sport we do, and it's absolutely fine to have that fear, have that emotion, and to talk about it. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next edition of the Debrief podcast. Until then, I hope we can get back in the sky pretty soon. Enjoy your flying, and we'll be back very soon with the next edition of the Debrief.